At Grandpa's will reading, his attorney pushed a massive check across the table. My father snatched it, lit it on fire right before my very eyes, and I didn't even protest. I simply grinned, because what he torched wasn't what he believed it was. Can you imagine the kind of rage that makes a man burn $38 million right in front of your face? Because that's exactly what my own father did. But here's the thing. I just smiled, because what he thought he was destroying. That was just the decoy. And trust me, the real story behind that burning check. It's even wilder. It all went down at Grandpa Arthur's will reading. I hadn't seen my dad, Marcus, in almost 5 years. The moment I walked into that polished, lemon-scented conference room at Albright and Finch, he glared at me like I was a court-ordered nuisance. My sister, Serafina, was already there, legs crossed, wearing that smug, self-satisfied look she gets when she thinks she's already won. Marcus, of course, was at the head of the table, acting like it was a hostile takeover meeting, not a solemn will reading. Miss Albright, our family lawyer for decades, the only person who ever saw me as anything other than an inconvenience, gave me a small, sad nod. No one else said a word. No hello. No hug. No, glad you're alive after your last deployment. But I wasn't there for them. I was there because I'd promised Grandpa Arthur I would be. That was it. Miss Albright cleared her throat. Her voice was calm, professional, like someone reading assembly instructions for a bookshelf that could end a marriage. To Serafina Blackwood, she began, the family property in Evergreen Lake and the antique Steinway piano. Serafina blinked, clearly expecting a larger piece of the empire. To Marcus Blackwood, Miss Albright continued, a set of first-edition Hemingway novels and a $10,000 donation to the American Ethics Council made in his name. My father actually snorted. It was a sharp, bitter sound. That's a joke, right? Miss Albright didn't flinch. She just turned the page. And to Cassandra Blackwood, my granddaughter, my only confidant, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes all financial holdings, real estate, and voting control over Braden Tech Systems. Effective immediately. Silence. Thick, heavy, suffocating silence. My dad's jaw tightened. Serafina's perfect smile cracked, just a little. Then, Miss Albright slid a check across the table to me. $38,246,000. Clean. Signed. Dated. I hadn't even touched it before Marcus lunged. He snatched the check like it had personally insulted him. You think this brings you back? He spat, his eyes blazing. Right there, in front of the lawyer and my sister, he pulled out a lighter and set the damn thing on fire. The paper curled, the flame dancing up Grandpa Arthur's signature like it was nothing. Serafina gasped. Miss Albright just leaned back in her chair, like this wasn't the first time she'd seen a man torch a fortune out of pure spite. Then Marcus looked at me and snarled, "That's what you get for walking out." But I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. I just smiled. Not a happy smile, but the kind you wear when you've already seen the ending, and you're just watching everyone else catch up. Because what he burned wasn't what he thought it was. He didn't see the second envelope, still tucked inside my coat pocket. The one Grandpa had given me a month before he died, wrapped in a napkin like some sacred text. Don't open this unless they try to burn it, he'd told me. And they did. So, I would. But not yet. First, I had to sit there in that polished room, listening to their fake grief and absolute rage. Serafina started whining about how something, obviously, isn't right. My dad accused Ms. Albright of forging the whole thing, like she was some criminal mastermind with a soft spot for military granddaughters. They kept going. Serafina demanded a second reading. Marcus wanted an audit. I just listened, hands in my lap, feeling the heat from the ashes fade, watching them unravel. The thing about people like them is they only understand power when it's visible. They think if they burn the paper, they burn the proof. If they raise their voices, they win. If they erase you on paper, you stop existing. But they don't know me. They don't know what I learned in Kandahar or how many nights I stayed invisible just to survive. They don't know what Grandpa told me the day I left: "You're the only one I trust to finish what I started." So when Marcus flicked the ashes of that check across the table and told me I was out, I just smiled. Because I already knew I was the only one still in. Under the table, my fingers brushed the edge of the real envelope, and I decided I wasn't leaving empty-handed. They could argue, throw threats, set the room on fire for all I cared. My job was done the moment I saw the look on Serafina's face when she realized the empire she thought she'd inherited had slipped right through her French manicured fingers. I walked out without a word. No door slam, no dramatic exit, just the steady sound of my boots on polished wood. The drive back to my apartment was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I just sat with the low hum of the road and the sound of my heartbeat trying to outpace my thoughts. The envelope was practically burning a hole in the passenger seat. But I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the kitchen, staring out at a street I didn't particularly like, but never left. The weight of it all was still settling. The inheritance, the fire, the silence. It felt too familiar, like that other silence from years ago when I came home from my first deployment. It was Thanksgiving. I'd been gone for almost 18 months. Syria, border patrol, convoy defense. I'd seen friends bleed out in the sand, buried a journal under rubble when a roadside bomb went off 2 feet from my tent. I still had the ringing in my right ear. But when I got home, Marcus said, "You didn't write." And that was that. No, welcome home. No, I'm glad you made it back. Just quiet judgment that filled the room like secondhand smoke. The house didn't even look the same. My room was gone. Physically gone. Desk gone. Bed replaced, bookshelf emptied. All my letters, photos, and graduation flag disappeared as if I'd never lived there. In their place were 2 beige armchairs, a potted fake orchid, and a framed quote about calm waters and quiet minds. I remember thinking it looked like a dentist's waiting room, except this one had a door that used to say, Cassandra, and now said, guest. Serafina passed me in the hall with a steaming mug of peppermint tea. She looked up, smirked, and said, "Don't be dramatic. You were gone for like, a year and a half." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I left. I moved into a cheap apartment off the highway, worked part-time security at a logistics yard while waiting for the VA to process my paperwork. Every few weeks, a wire transfer would show up from someone named Blackwood, just enough to keep the heat on and gas in the car. No notes, no contact. But I always knew. Grandpa Arthur never said much, but he saw me like nobody else. When I was 12 and wanted to enlist in junior ROTC, he showed up with boots that fit and a grin like I just passed some secret test. When Marcus said the military was a dead end for people who couldn't cut it in business, Grandpa said, "Maybe that's why your board meetings feel like war zones." He didn't pick sides. He picked me. And maybe that's why when he got sick, and the calls stopped, I knew something was wrong. I visited once, just once near the end. He was thinner, quieter, but his mind was still sharp. He handed me the envelope at Hillside Diner over lukewarm coffee and a shared piece of lemon pie. "Don't open this unless they burn it," he said. I remember thinking he was being dramatic. I said something sarcastic. "What, you think they're going to set fire to $1 million check?" He didn't smile. "I think they'll try to erase you." And just like that, we both knew what he meant. I still hadn't opened the envelope, but I was getting close. Its weight on the kitchen counter grew heavier by the minute, as if it knew something I didn't. I stared at it for a long time, half hoping it would open itself and solve everything. It didn't. I picked it up with both hands, like it might bite if I moved too fast. It was thick, sealed with red wax, the kind Grandpa always used for birthday cards, like it made them more official. I cracked it open with my thumbnail and pulled out a single folded sheet and a USB drive taped to the back. The paper was typed, notarized, and dated 3 weeks before he died. It was a trust transfer form. The check had been real, but it was just a decoy. The actual funds were already transferred. The real inheritance had been processed quietly and legally with a digital paper trail that would have made my father sweat through his $5,000 blazer. I stared at the account number at the bottom of the page. The last 4 digits were Grandpa's birthday reversed. He knew I'd remember. I plugged in the USB. No password. No delay. Just a folder labeled Inheritance. Inside, bank documents, legal authorizations, company control transfers, and something that looked like a draft of a second will. I exhaled, leaned back in my chair, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not safety. Just confirmation. I wasn't crazy. But my relief lasted about 5 minutes. I logged into my bank app to check the linked account. The app glitched. Then it gave me an error, account not found. I tried another card, declined. I typed everything slower, like being careful might fix whatever this was. Still nothing. It didn't feel like a glitch anymore. I called customer service. A guy named Dylan picked up, sounding like he'd rather be anywhere else. Hi. Yeah, my account's saying I'm not in the system anymore, I said. Can you check on that? He asked for my name, birthday, last 4 of my social. I gave them all. Another pause. It was certified by the registrar's office 2 weeks ago, he said, his voice flat. Legally deceased. I hung up before my voice cracked. Next stop, DMV. I waited an hour behind a woman arguing about a parking ticket from 2006. When I got to the counter, I handed over my ID. The clerk looked at her screen, frowned, tapped a few keys, then looked up. Ma'am, she said, you're flagged as legally deceased. I'm standing right here, I said. I get that, but the system doesn't. You'll have to file a correction through Vital Records. How long does that take? Could be a few months. End of queue. I walked out before I could punch a window. Back on the sidewalk, I felt like a ghost. People passed me like I was normal, like I still existed. But I'd seen enough bureaucracy to know once a system decides you're dead, it takes a hell of a lot to prove otherwise. And someone had made damn sure I disappeared. The sky was overcast. I pulled my coat tighter. Across the street, a woman stood watching under a line of bare trees. Sunglasses too oversized for the dim light. A blue silk scarf looped once around her neck. My mother's scarf. The one she said the dry cleaners lost 3 years ago. Eleanor. My stepmother. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there, still and silent, like a threat that hadn't spoken. I stepped into traffic and crossed slowly. When I reached the other side, she was gone. No footsteps, no trace. Back at my apartment, I pulled out every letter Grandpa had sent me over the years. Dozens. Folded into neat stacks, tucked inside books, drawers, behind picture frames. His handwriting was steady, even near the end. I found an old brass key wrapped in a faded handkerchief in one of the envelopes. The tag read, Langford, Box 17. He'd given it to me on my 18th birthday and said, you'll need this someday. I guess someday had arrived. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed the key, and walked out the door before I could talk myself out of it. Langford storage wasn't far. 15 minutes through the quieter part of town. Old storefronts, cracked sidewalks, mailboxes hanging by one hinge. I parked in front of a wine shop that hadn't been open since before the pandemic, and found the door between it and a boarded-up bookstore. No sign, just a black buzzer and a faded camera that blinked red once when I pressed the button. A woman opened the door. Late 50s, crisp ponytail. No name tag. No smile. "You have a key." I handed it over. She looked at the tag, Box 17, checked a clipboard, then waved me inside without a word. The hallway was narrow and cold. Lights buzzed overhead like they hadn't been replaced since Reagan. We walked past 6 steel doors before she stopped at one, typed in a code, and opened it. "Take your time," she said, shutting the door behind me. The room was windowless, silent, just rows of drawers set into concrete walls. I found Box 17 halfway down, waist level, and slid it open. Inside was a black fireproof folder and a manila envelope. No dust, no smell, like it had been waiting. I sat down on the floor. The first thing I pulled out was a certified cashier's check. Same amount, same name, but this time with security features baked into the paper. The watermark shimmered when I tilted it. Real. Taped to the back was a tiny red sticker, "Non-negotiable copy burned." That told me everything I needed to know. The manila envelope had a sticky note in Grandpa's handwriting on the front, "Trust no one." Not even her. No name, just her. But I had a guess. Inside, printouts of emails, handwritten notes, legal drafts. He documented everything. Every conversation with his lawyer, every asset transfer, every board meeting agenda from Braden Tech Systems for the last 12 months. Some of the papers had Serafina's name on them, meeting minutes she attended, contracts she signed. None of it looked casual. The final document was heavier. A flash drive. Inside a velvet pouch and a note, "Play only once, and only when you're alone." I pocketed it and got out of there fast. Back at my apartment, I locked the door, pulled the blinds, and plugged in the flash drive. No label, no folders, just one file, Blackwood. Final. I clicked it. Grandpa Arthur's face filled the screen. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered. He was sitting in the sunroom of his house, light pouring over his shoulder like a soft filter. "If you're seeing this, Cassandra," he said, "then they did what I thought they'd do." His voice was even. No drama. No shaking hands. He knew how to deliver a message. "I've watched them lie to your face, dismiss your service, turn your absence into ammunition, and I did nothing for too long. That ends now." He leaned forward slightly. "You're the only one who ever told me the truth. Even when I didn't want to hear it. That's why I left it all to you. Not just the money. The name. The company. The ground it's built on. I'm giving you the foundation because you know what to do with it." He paused. A long silence. "Your father will try to erase you. He'll say you abandoned the family. He'll weaponize your past. He'll pretend you don't exist. Let him." Then he smiled, just barely. "Because the only thing more dangerous than a man with money is a woman with receipts." The screen went black. No logo, no goodbye. I was alone in a dark apartment with the weight of a legacy, sitting on a cheap desk I'd bought off Craigslist. I sat there a long time, not thinking, not planning, just breathing. I instinctively pulled the papers from the manila envelope and laid them across the floor, line by line, signature by signature, cross-referencing every number, every name. In the corner of one printout was a contact name I hadn't seen in years, Eleanor Vance. My dad's second wife. Technically, my stepmother, but only on paper. She vanished after Mom died, married Marcus within the year, and floated through life like a ghost with a perfect blowout and zero opinions. I hadn't thought about her in forever, but her name was there, right below a legal filing timestamped 2 weeks before Grandpa's death, which meant she'd been involved, and not in the background. I circled her name with a red marker and underlined it twice. Eleanor Vance didn't show up in many conversations, but things usually went sideways when she did. She was static, never the center of the noise, just enough to distort the signal. The last real thing I remembered her saying to me was at my mom's funeral when she put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Your mother was complicated." That was her version of sympathy. I rechecked the timestamp. The filing was lodged through a small estate law firm in Charleston, connected to a property Grandpa had held in trust for over 20 years. I never knew about it because my name had never been on any deed until now. I opened the folder from the USB again and found a second address listed under Confidential Holdings, Langford. Not the vault I had just visited, a second one I hadn't heard of. The file said, Box Array 6 billion. Entry via security list only. I paused. My name was printed next to the line. Access level, confirmed. Langford Security Vaults was 3 hours outside the city. The place looked more like a Cold War museum than a storage facility. Steel gates, motion sensors, guards with actual firearms. Not the place you walk into with questions unless you already have the correct answers. I drove out just before noon, parked outside the perimeter, and walked in with nothing but the old key, the printout, and nerves I hadn't felt since Kandahar. The woman at the front desk wore a navy blazer with no name tag. She scanned the key, then looked me up and down. ID. I slid it across the counter. She scanned it, then looked up. You're dead. Only legally, I said. I'm working on that. Her lips twitched like she wanted to smile, but knew better. She typed something else, then nodded. Follow me. I did, down another corridor, colder than the first vault. More cameras. The silence was surgical. She opened a door labeled Array 6 billion and motioned me inside. No words. This one didn't look like a bank vault. It looked like a private evidence locker. I found box 6 billion on the middle shelf, opened it with the key. Inside was a black briefcase and a sealed manila folder with my name in block letters. No title, no stamp. Cassandra Blackwood, underlined once, as if it didn't need explaining. The briefcase clicked open with old push-button latches. Inside, a deed, a corporate ownership ledger, a single flash drive in a velvet-lined pocket. The deed was for the Hollow Foundation, listed as a non-profit veteran support center located on the grounds of the Charleston property. The name on the document: Cassandra Blackwood, Executive Director, sole owner. Underneath it, legal filings confirming that all holdings from Braden Tech's Humanitarian Division were officially transferred to Hollow 6 weeks before Grandpa died. Quietly. Completely legal. No press. The ledger showed something else. Complete ownership of Braden Tech executive shares had been reassigned through a trust mechanism that bypassed the family board. He'd handed me the company. Silently, without waiting for their approval. The flash drive lit up blue when I plugged it in. Inside, another video file, no title. I hit play. Grandpa was sitting in the same sunroom, this time with files stacked around him. If you made it to Vault 2, he said, then you figured out the first one wasn't the whole picture. He reached off camera and held up a document. This is the transfer of ownership for the humanitarian arm. The part 1 built from scratch after Vietnam. The part Marcus never touched because he couldn't monetize it. I left it to you because you never asked me for anything, but you showed up when it counted. He looked down briefly as if to choose his following words carefully. I couldn't stop what they planned, but I made sure they couldn't erase you. You don't need their permission. You never did. All you need now is proof they forged your name. That's your keystone. Everything else will fall after that. He looked straight at the camera. Don't flinch, Cassandra. They're going to come hard. The screen went dark. I sat there, surrounded by a dead man's voice and a war he'd left for me to finish. I slid the flash drive back into its pouch and called the one person I never thought I'd need, Eleanor. She didn't answer on the first try or the second, but on the third call, she picked up with that polished, rehearsed tone, like I was a reporter asking about her skincare routine. "You knew," I said. A pause, just air between us. "I didn't sign anything," she replied. "I want that on record." I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. "You helped file it." I handed Marcus an envelope. I didn't ask what was in it. He said it was an insurance document for estate protection. I believed him. That wasn't a lie. That was how she survived in that house. I waited. He had a notary come by. A friend of his. She stamped everything. I thought it was something boring and complicated and rich people. Legal. How long ago? 3 weeks before your grandfather passed. Did you see a death certificate? Another pause. A longer one. Yes. Your name was on it. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't thank her. Just hung up. Back in my apartment, I opened my filing cabinet, the one I hadn't touched in a year, and pulled out my original Social Security card, birth certificate, and passport, all still in my name. I took them straight to the county registrar's office and asked to speak to someone about a fraudulent death record. The clerk took one look at my paperwork and frowned. Then she looked at her screen. "I don't know how this happened," she said. "But your file was closed by court order." "What court?" "Family Estate Division. The order came through as part of a sealed emergency motion. Very rare." "Can I see it?" "No," she said. "Not unless you get a judge to open it." "How long does that take?" She looked over her glasses. "Depends on who you pissed off." I walked out with a headache and a printout that confirmed what I already knew. Someone had filed to erase me legally, and someone else had stamped it like it was routine. At home, I dug into the printed emails from the vault. One name kept popping up. Dr. Evelyn Shaw, retired physician, used to do house calls for elite families, including mine. The emails showed she'd verified long-term mental instability and identity confusion in a letter addressed to the estate court. I had never met this woman. Her phone number was disconnected, but her address was still in the system, one town over. I drove there that night. The house was small, overgrown, peeling paint. No car in the driveway. The lights were off, but the mailbox had mail dated 2 days earlier. Someone still lived here. I knocked. No answer, so I sat in the car and waited. 30 minutes later, a sedan pulled up. An older woman got out with 2 grocery bags. The same name was on the license plate frame, Dr. Shaw. She saw me and froze. I got out and walked up slowly, hands in my jacket pockets. "I'm not here to threaten you," I said. "But you signed something about me, something false, and I need to know who told you to." She blinked hard, like her brain was buffering. I was. It was Marcus Blackwood. She didn't answer, just nodded, slow and shameful. "He said you were mentally unwell," she whispered. "Said you'd suffered psychological damage overseas. That you believe things that weren't real. He made it sound tragic. And you believed him." I signed what he gave me. I didn't know they'd actually file it. "You thought he wanted fake medical records for fun." "I thought it was a formality for inheritance cleanup." "He said you'd agreed to it." I didn't bother arguing. "Get a lawyer," I said. "And don't answer any more of his calls." She didn't respond, just backed toward her door and locked it behind her. It wasn't guilt that burned most. It was how easy it had been for them. How casual. Signing me off the planet was no different than renewing a car lease. And somewhere in that paper trail, I knew Serafina's name was waiting. I drove straight to the only person I trusted who'd know how to burn it down without leaving a fingerprint. Vivian Thorne answered the door in sweatpants and a threadbare Harvard Law hoodie, holding a slice of cold pizza and a mug of black coffee that smelled like it had been reheated twice. Her place was cluttered, lived in, full of files that probably could have collapsed a senator or two if anyone knew where to look. She took one look at me and stepped aside. "This better be illegal." "It is." "Good," she said, and handed me the pizza slice. "Eat. You look like a ghost with a grudge." I sat on her busted leather couch while she opened the folder I brought. She flipped through the documents like counting cards at a casino she owned: the death certificate, the false medical report, the estate filings, the ownership transfers, the check, the flash drive. She didn't speak until she reached the part with Serafina's forged signature. "Classic," she muttered. "They filed it through a Delaware shell. Sloppy. Did they think no one would check? I think they didn't expect me to come back." She raised an eyebrow. "They filed you dead. That's not coming back. That's biblical." Vivian used to run a nonprofit legal aid group for veterans with dishonorable discharges. She'd represented soldiers falsely accused, wrongly imprisoned, and gaslit by their command. She once sued the Pentagon over a housing scam, and won. That was before she lost funding, quit the nonprofit world, and started working out of her living room on cases the real firms didn't want to touch. "I'll need access to your VA files," she said. "And anything you have from the military, deployment orders, discharge papers, especially anything signed." I handed her a second folder from my bag. She scanned it and nodded. "This proves you're alive. Proves you didn't agree to squat. And if we can match this signature to the one they used on the stock transfer." She trailed off. "You can take them down." "No," she said. "You can." I hadn't expected that. "You want revenge or justice?" she asked, sipping the worst-smelling coffee I'd ever encountered. "Because they don't come in the same box." "What's the difference?" "Justice follows the law. Revenge breaks it." I didn't answer. She went to her computer, typed for 30 seconds, then said, "Braden Tech's board will be vulnerable if we hit them at their annual audit window. That's in 11 days. If you want to blow this up, that's your shot." "I want it airtight," I said. "No spectacle, no scandal, just facts and fire." Vivian grinned. "Facts and fire. That's going on my gravestone." She pulled out her phone and called someone named Julian. "Reed," she said, "got a live one. Military, inheritance, fraud, forged death, the works. Meet me at the office. Bring the clean laptop." She hung up and turned to me. "Julian Reed is a forensic document analyst. Works. He's got the kind of eyes that can spot a forged signature at 50 yards, and he won't blink at who we're going after." I nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Full authorization, everything. I'll draft it up. In the meantime, don't talk to anyone. Don't post. And for the love of God, don't try to play hero. This isn't the part where you go rogue. It's the part where you let me build the kill shot." I leaned back on the couch. My hands were still clenched. Vivian watched me. "You all right?" "I thought I was done being in wars." She shrugged. "Family ones are worse. Fewer rules." I left an hour later with a burner phone, a folder labeled Temple Legal Hold, and a direct line to Julian Reed, who texted me exactly 2 things before I even got home: "We'll verify every doc. But first we find the signature that buries them." I didn't respond. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes and stared at the steering wheel. The last time I'd followed an order this precise, I was wearing body armor and praying no one tripped an IED. Now, I was wearing a hoodie, carrying a USB drive, and about to incinerate my entire family name, legally. The war had already started. This was just the first real shot fired. I tossed the burner phone on the passenger seat and drove straight to the storage unit where I kept what no one else knew I still had. Unit 11V sat at the end of a crumbling row of metal garages behind a busted fence in South Brighton. No cameras. No contracts with any national chain. Just a guy named Dennis who ran the place and didn't ask questions as long as your rent cleared. Mine always did. Inside the unit, a black plastic foot locker, military issued, scratched and dented like it had stories to tell. I cracked it open and pulled out my deployment binder, orders, discharge papers, mission reports, and most importantly, hard copies of my signature from 6 years of federal paperwork. Not digital trails, not edits. All original. I drove straight to Vivian's office and laid everything on the table. Julian Reed was already there, mid-30s, wire-framed glasses, ponytail, and a resting face that said he once got interrogated and enjoyed it. He gave me a polite nod like we were co-workers in a crisis. No small talk. He picked up one of the documents, held it under a UV lamp, and then pulled out a separate folder labeled Braden Tech Equity Transfer Gray Trust. Inside were the documents Serafina had filed on my behalf. 2 pages in, Julian grunted. See this? He pointed to the loop in the G of my last name. You do this little hook on the downstroke consistently. But here. He flipped to the fake transfer doc, flatline. No hook. Also, the signature is scanned. You're sure? I asked. He didn't look up. It's a lift. Someone pulled it from a military DD-214, my guess. The 2018 discharge packet. It's public enough. Sloppy execution, though. Can you prove it? He snapped a picture, then pulled up software on his laptop. Side-by-side comparison, line pressure analysis, pixel compression levels, overlay render. In under 2 minutes, he said, I can write the affidavit tonight. This would fall apart in court in 10 minutes. Vivian handed me a printout. Here's what that forgery gave them. Serafina sold 40% of your voting shares last quarter to a holding company tied to Marcus's real estate trust. They're trying to roll the company under full family control before the next board vote. My death, I said. She signed with my name. She signed with a fake version of your name during a time when you were legally deceased. It's not just a civil problem anymore. What is it then? Julian answered. Wire fraud. Document fraud. Possibly conspiracy. If Marcus coordinated the notary, definitely perjury. And if the assets cross state lines, we're in federal territory. Vivian leaned forward. This is the thread. We pull it right and the whole sweater comes undone. End to end, probable. I stared at the documents in front of me. Seeing myself on paper, my name, my handwriting, it was strange, but knowing none of it came from me felt like watching someone wear your skin and wave from a balcony you never stepped on. Vivian added, I filed a preliminary injunction to freeze the company's board action, but it won't stick unless we get a judge to see this evidence firsthand. What do you need me to do? She looked me dead in the eye. Stay alive, stay quiet, and don't lose your temper. This only works if they don't know you're building the case. Let them think you're still stunned. Julian handed me a flash drive, backup of all my findings for your records. I put it in my pocket. The whole thing felt too neat, too logical, and that was precisely what scared me. My family didn't operate in logic. They operated in chaos, distraction, and narrative. I wasn't playing defense anymore, and they'd feel that soon. But first, I needed one last piece. A thread left hanging. One she never meant for me to see. I pulled up the interview request I denied 3 months ago and called the reporter she'd ghosted. His name was Ben Carter, veteran investigative journalist. Won a regional Emmy for exposing a defense contractor bribery ring in Arlington. He answered on the first ring like he was expecting bad news. "This is Ben. This is Cassandra Blackwood. You asked my sister for comment in April." There was a pause. Quick, sharp, loaded. "You're the one Braden Tech filed dead." "That's me." "Interesting. What changed?" "I'm not dead." "That'll do it." We met that night in a diner just off Route 15. He wore a denim jacket and had a recorder on the table before I sat down. No pretense, just journalism. I laid it all out. The forged death certificate, the fake signatures, the ownership grab. I showed him the affidavit from Julian and the filing Vivian had started. I didn't hold anything back. Ben didn't blink. He just kept jotting notes, tapping on his phone occasionally. "I've heard whispers," he said, "that Marcus is prepping to take Braden Tech public. You can't do that clean if a $38 million asset transfer is sitting on a forged corpse." "Exactly. Do you want this public, or just used as leverage?" "I want the truth to work harder than their lies." "Copy that." He didn't promise a timeline. Didn't say when or where. Just told me he'd run it clean and tight. 2 days later, the first article dropped. Daughter declared dead. Cut from $38 million inheritance. Braden Tech family power play unraveling. It hit the morning cycle like a nail through the throat. By noon, a second wave followed. Blogs, comment threads, veterans groups, corporate gossip pages. My inbox exploded. People I'd served with sent screenshots with laughing emojis. "Is this for real?" Texts. I didn't answer any of them. That afternoon, Marcus went live on a local news station trying to do damage control. He sat in a navy suit with his American flag pin and carefully trimmed beard, speaking in the voice he used when talking to investors. Warm. Confident. Manipulative. "We're saddened by the misinformation being spread," he began. "Cassandra has had difficulties since her return from overseas. The family has done its best to support her through that process. Sometimes people lash out when they feel isolated. They rolled old footage of me in uniform walking off a C-130. Sand still on my boots. Then they showed a headline from years ago, Civilian Casualty Inquiry, Sergeant Blackwood refused strike order. That was their angle. That I was unstable, disgraced, dangerous. No mention that I refused to target a building full of non-combatants. No mention that the inquiry cleared me. No mention that the only reason I'd even been reported was because the commanding officer's cousin ran the contractor supplying the airstrike. They weaponized my past like it was a campaign ad. Vivian called me before I could throw a chair through my television. "Breathe," she said. "This was always coming. They're rewriting history. They're buying time, and that means they're scared." Julian sent a message 5 minutes later, "Let them overplay the receipts. Don't blink." He was right. The problem with men like Marcus was that they thought power made them invisible. But they'd never face someone trained for years to disappear and strike in silence. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't their problem. I was the perimeter breach. And that made them sloppy. By 9 p.m., I had 3 anonymous tips in my inbox. All former Braden Tech employees. One worked in internal audits. One handled digital assets. One left with a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement she was about to break wide open. The third one was attached as a PDF, asset transfer logs. Transaction trail. Consulting invoice signed by Serafina Blackwood on behalf of Cassandra Blackwood. The same forged signature Julian had flagged. They hadn't stopped with the stock. They'd been moving funds, too. Vivian forwarded the file to the district clerk, requesting an emergency hearing. I stayed up reading every line. On page 17, there was proof of payment to a legal courier service. One name listed as the contact for coordination, Eleanor Vance. I closed the file, grabbed my coat, and headed out before the rage settled into something quieter. The air outside was hard. The kind of cold that made everything feel sharper, more personal. I didn't drive. I walked 15 blocks to a narrow brick building where Ben Carter worked nights out of a second-floor office above a used record store that hadn't sold anything since 2009. The buzzer didn't work, so I banged the glass. He opened the door with his sleeves rolled, a pen behind his ear, and a look that said, "Please tell me you've got something better than your last bombshell." I handed him a flash drive. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask what was on it. Just plugged it in, loaded the video, and watched. Grandpa filled the screen. No intro. No preamble. Just him sitting in that sunroom again, files in his lap, voice steady, like this was a business meeting with history on the line. "If you're watching this," he said. Then Marcus did what I couldn't stop him from doing. His face was calm, not bitter, just done. He was never supposed to inherit Braden Tech. He never earned it. He never understood what it was for. He saw contracts. I saw responsibility. He saw numbers. I saw people. The light hit his shoulder just right. No drama, just clarity. I changed the will because I saw what Cassandra had become. Not perfect, but principled. And when you build something with the intention of it outliving you, you don't hand it off to the loudest bidder. You hand it off to the person who won't sell it the second you're in the ground. He paused. Cassandra is the future of this company, this family. And if they try to bury her, let this serve as record. I changed everything of my own free will. No pressure, no manipulation. Just a choice made with both eyes open. He leaned forward, closer to the camera. They're going to lie. And they're going to lie big. But the truth doesn't blink. Then the video ended. Nothing flashy, no fade out, just black. Ben looked at me. "You want this live?" "Everywhere." He didn't hesitate. 15 minutes later, the clip was on 3 platforms, linked in a follow-up article and attached to a press release with quotes from 2 legal analysts and a former Braden Tech employee who'd agreed to go on the record. By midnight, it had over 300,000 views. By morning, Marcus's PR team was in complete scramble. His legal rep issued a vague statement calling the video emotionally charged but irrelevant to formal legal processes. That was their play. Minimize and wait for it to blow over. Except it didn't. By noon, half the defense tech community had picked it up. Military blogs, Reddit forums, stock chatter rooms, everyone had a take, and most of them weren't flattering. Serafina wasn't there, probably because she knew the look on his face meant he was about to make things worse. "I understand emotions are high," he said, "but family matters should be resolved privately." Then came the mistake. He added, "This company was never meant to be run by someone with a history of mental instability and unverified claims." There it was. The mask dropped. Ben clipped that line and posted it solo. By 6 p.m., it had 2 million views. People didn't just turn on Marcus, they dragged him. Veterans called him out. Shareholders questioned the ethics clause. Former employees posted anonymously about how he ran meetings like military tribunals with a god complex. Braden Tech issued a rare statement confirming a temporary freeze on asset movement pending an internal review. Vivian called me after the statement went live. "You just cracked the damn wall," she said. "Now all we need is the hammer." I showed up to court in all black and didn't smile once. No lipstick, no jewelry, just clean lines, polished boots, and the silence filling a room before a controlled detonation. Vivian told me to look like leadership. I told her I already did. Marcus arrived with a fresh haircut, a custom navy suit, and 2 attorneys from a corporate catalog. His face was tight. No smirk. No eye contact. Vivian told me once she'd seen Judge Reynolds dismiss a millionaire mid-sentence for dramatic tone. That's the kind of judge we wanted. Vivian stood as our case was called. We are here to contest the suppression of legal identity and the fraudulent execution of financial documents related to the estate of Arthur Blackwood. Marcus's lawyer, a smooth-talking guy named Arthur Sterling, rose with a rehearsed sigh. Your Honor, this is a family dispute dressed up in courtroom drag. The decedent's will was read, reviewed, and witnessed. My clients, Mr. Blackwood and Miss Serafina Blackwood, acted entirely within the bounds of estate protocol. Judge Reynolds didn't blink. Then, you won't mind if I see the video? Sterling paused. Video? Vivian tapped her tablet. The lights dimmed. The monitor lit up. And there he was, Grandpa, calm as ever. If they're watching this, he said, it means they tried to bury her. But this isn't just money. It's memory. It's legacy. And if they tried to burn hers down, this is how she comes back. No one spoke when the clip ended. The silence was clean, heavy. The kind people respect. Judge Reynolds folded her hands. What's the defense's position on this testimony? Sterling cleared his throat. It's emotionally compelling, Your Honor, but ultimately irrelevant to legal standing. Vivian raised a brow. Then perhaps the forged signature, the falsified death certificate, and the wire fraud logs will provide better context. She handed over a thick binder, all documented, time-stamped, and cross-verified, including a sworn affidavit from the doctor who was misled into certifying Miss Blackwood's death. Serafina squirmed in her chair. Marcus leaned forward like he wanted to break the table in half. Judge Reynolds flipped through the binder for a full 30 seconds. That doesn't sound like much unless you're the one being exposed. Then came the slow nod. Let the record reflect, she said, that I find the evidence of identity suppression and signature forgery credible and serious. Sterling stood again, desperate. Now, Your Honor, even if there was confusion, these events unfolded under the belief that Miss Blackwood had abandoned her role in the family and company. Judge Reynolds didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You didn't just try to manipulate this court, she said, turning her attention to Marcus. You tried to erase a person. A veteran. Your daughter. Then to Serafina, and you facilitated it. Serafina opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Judge Reynolds's gavel hit once. This court recognizes Cassandra Blackwood as the sole legal heir to Arthur Blackwood's estate and the rightful controller of Braden Tech Systems and all associated assets. Sterling tried to interject, but Judge Reynolds cut him off with a look that could crack a windshield. All transfers, sales, and actions made under false authority are hereby frozen pending criminal investigation. I didn't flinch. Didn't smirk. Just stood still, like every muscle had been waiting for this moment to exhale and didn't quite know how. Marcus stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might break. Serafina looked like she wanted to cry, but didn't remember how. Vivian leaned over and whispered, "You just took the throne, Blackwood." Outside the courthouse, the press was already gathering. Ben had a camera crew on standby. I walked right past them. No statement, no comment, no spin. Just the sound of my boots on stone and the weight of my name finally sitting right. I took the long way to the cafe, letting the cold wind slap some of the courtroom weight off my shoulders. Serafina picked a neutral spot, Midtown Cafe, overlit, overpriced, full of professionals pretending to be busy. She was already there when I walked in, sitting by the window with 2 coffees on the table. She hadn't touched either. When she saw me, she stood too fast, unsure if she was greeting me or bracing for impact. I sat down without speaking. I didn't know, she blurted. About the death certificate. About the will. I swear. You signed it. I thought it was standard paperwork. Dad said it was part of the restructuring. I just signed where he told me to. I stared at her. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered, like the months of pretending hadn't sat well on her. I was scared, she said. He said if I didn't help, I'd lose everything, too. So, you chose survival. Her hands shook slightly as she wrapped them around the coffee cup. I didn't think you'd fight. You always just left. That's because I knew what happened when I stayed. I didn't mean for it to get this far, but you let it. Serafina blinked fast. You have to believe me. No, I said. I really don't. She nodded, looking down at her lap. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I thought I was protecting what was ours. Ours never included me, Serafina. Not once. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. You didn't just sign a form. You signed me off the map. You stood there and watched them light it all on fire. I was stupid. No, I said, you were careful. Stupid would have been forgivable. She wiped at her eyes with the cuff of her coat. So, what now? I took out my phone and set it face down on the table. It had been recording since I sat down. She didn't notice. I'm not pressing charges, I said. You'll get whatever's fair under the law, but you don't get access. No seats at the table. No stake in the company. You're not part of the rebuild. Her voice cracked. I'm still your sister. And I'm still alive. I paused. That didn't seem to matter much a few months ago. I stood up. Cassandra, please. I looked down at her, at the half-finished version of someone who once braided my hair before school and whispered secrets under the covers. But there was nothing left there I needed to hold on to. You picked your side, I said. And now you get to live with it. Outside, the wind had picked up. I zipped my coat and kept walking, past the train station, past the people with umbrellas fighting the wind, past the places we used to eat together. None of it felt like it belonged to me anymore. And that was fine. I wasn't trying to reclaim what was lost. I was building something new with hands they hadn't broken. And Serafina, like the rest of them, would just have to watch. I stepped off the sidewalk and crossed the street without looking back. The key was already tightened in my hand. The building was small, red brick, squat between a florist and a shuttered laundromat. The windows were tall, but scuffed, like they'd been ignored long enough to forget they ever let in light. The front lock clicked open easily. I stepped inside. Dust, silence, the kind of emptiness that made room for something new. This was it. The address on the envelope Grandpa had marked, "Start here." It used to be a print shop back in the 60s. Then a piano studio. Then nothing. Now it was mine. I sat cross-legged on the floor, took out the last envelope from the vault, and opened it slowly. Inside, a sketch of the floor plan in Grandpa's hand, a half-completed business license application, and a note with 4 words underlined, "Make something they can't erase." So, I did. I called the county office and fast-tracked the license. I reactivated my LLC from 3 years ago, Blackwood Insight Group, which had never really taken off, but never officially died either. Within a week, permits were filed, contractors scheduled, paint colors picked. 2 weeks later, the sign went up, Blackwood Foundation, Veterans. Women Forward. It wasn't flashy. No ribbon cutting. No press photos. Just me and a guy named Ethan who'd served 2 tours in Kandahar and now ran a non-profit building rehab program for women vets. We drank burnt coffee and signed the paperwork on the front desk counter. "What are you hoping to do here?" he asked. "Build what I needed 10 years ago," I said. Ethan nodded like he understood more than I was saying. The Foundation's first project, a legal fund for female veterans navigating discharge disputes and post-service housing instability. Second, a mentorship program connecting young women in ROTC with seasoned female officers. I called it Operation Second Voice. Grandpa would have hated the branding, but loved the fight. Vivian joined the board pro bono. Ben ran the press release through his network. Julian helped set up the data security infrastructure because I trusted 3 people in this world, and he was still one of them. The money wasn't an issue. I had control now. I didn't need to fight for scraps. I needed to make the scraps into something sharp enough to cut through. And for the first time, the work felt clean. No more boardrooms full of knives and smiles. No more pretending I belonged to people who only saw me as leverage or liability. One morning, I received a letter from an old P.O. box I hadn't touched in years. No return address, just a crumpled envelope with handwriting I'd know anywhere. Inside, a photo of Grandpa and me at age 7, sitting on the porch. Both of us wearing matching paper crowns he'd made from birthday gift wrap. On the back, in his handwriting, "Takes more than fire to stop royalty." I pinned it to the corkboard in my office. No frame, just thumbtacks. Clients came, partners signed on, the space filled. Not all the wounds healed. Something stayed bruised, but the building stood, and that was enough. One night, I stayed late to clean up after a vet group session. Empty coffee cups, old paperwork, chairs out of place. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and stood outside for a second. The street was quiet, the sky was clear. I didn't feel like a daughter or a soldier or a ghost. I just felt solid, like I'd finally stepped into the version of me they never saw coming. And there wasn't a damn thing they could do about it. So, tell me, after hearing all of this, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to fight to prove your own existence? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.